You've been pretty strong in what you've said in the past, that you think it's a very serious possibility that as more and more revelations come out about Prince Andrew, or Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor as he is now, and Jeffrey Epstein and what he got up to in those dark years, that it is not beyond the realms of possibility that the former Prince Andrew could end up behind bars.
Imagine hearing a survivor look straight into the camera and ask a former prince of the United Kingdom a question so blunt, so direct, and so unsettling that it leaves the entire royal establishment frozen. Imagine someone who has lived through years of trauma telling a man born into unimaginable privilege not to hide behind titles, not to hide behind palaces, not to hide behind lawyers, but to finally stand up and face the truth. And now imagine that survivor saying this to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor himself. If it's something you've done, just say it. What's the worst that could happen now? Those were the words that shifted the air. Those were the words that made the world pause. Those were the words that are now echoing through the House of Windsor with a force no one saw coming. Before we dive in, there's something I need to share with you. Over the past few days, thousands have watched these stories unfold, but most haven't subscribed. If you're one of them, I invite you now to join us. Subscribe to Crownverse so you never miss the next chapter in this unfolding royal history. She is Marina Lacerda, a woman who spent years known only as Minor Victim 1, a faceless code buried deep in legal documents. A reminder of how many lives were scarred and how many voices went unheard. For most of her life, she was hidden behind sealed files and court initials. But today, she stands in front of the world, not as an anonymous victim, but as a woman who has reclaimed her name, her voice, and her place in this story. And with that newfound strength, she has delivered one of the most powerful messages ever spoken to a member of the British royal family. She did not whisper. She did not soften her tone. She did not hide the pain that shaped her life. She addressed Andrew directly. She spoke about accountability. She spoke about the truth. She spoke about his daughters. And she spoke about why, after everything the world knows, and everything the world suspects, silence is no longer acceptable. Marina's story begins long before the cameras, long before the public appearances, long before anyone knew her name. She was just a child when she was drawn into the orbit of a man the world would later recognize as one of the most infamous predators of the modern era. She was just 14 when she was told she could make easy money. She was just a teenager when she was promised that everything would be fine, that nothing bad would happen, that this was just a job. But she remembers the moment she walked into that room. She remembers removing her blouse because she was told that was expected. She remembers saying no when he tried to touch her. She remembers him respecting that no, but then immediately turning the moment into something dark and uncomfortable as he began touching himself. She was a child, and she was in a room with a dangerous man who treated her like an object instead of a human being. That night would become the beginning of years of trauma. She was groomed, manipulated, and exploited from 14 to 17, until the day he told her she was too old. Too old at 17. That is the world she survived. That is the weight she carries. And that is why her voice today matters more than ever. Over those years, she remembers being surrounded by pictures. Pictures of powerful men, recognizable faces, global figures. She recalls seeing photographs of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton on the walls of Epstein's office. These are her recollections, the images that stayed burned in her memory. They raise questions, and not all of those questions have answers. They raise suspicions, and not all of those suspicions have been resolved. But they are part of her lived experience. And when Marina speaks about what she saw, she speaks with the weight of reality. Even when some oft-told details remain unverified or uncorroborated by independent investigations. For years, she remained silent. For years, she lived with the fear, the shame, the confusion, and the thought that no one would listen. But now that she has revealed her identity, she refuses to stay quiet. And a target of her message is not a shadow. It is not a faceless institution. It is not a nameless figure. It is Andrew himself. Andrew, who once held the title of His Royal Highness. Andrew, who once represented Britain on the global stage. Andrew, who once lived with the full support and protection of the monarchy. Andrew, who once insisted on national television that he could not have been involved in anything because on the night in question, he was supposedly having pizza with his daughters. Andrew, who once believed that the walls of the palace, the shields of tradition, and the weight of royal history would protect him. But over the past few years, everything has changed. The monarchy has distanced itself from him. His titles were removed. His public role evaporated. The lavish privileges that came with his name faded, and the world no longer looks at him with respect, but with suspicion, outrage, and disbelief. And now, into this moment of decline, comes Marina's voice. A voice that refuses to be ignored. A voice that refuses to let the truth remain buried. A voice that says directly to Andrew, if you know this isomething that you've done and you regret it, just say it to the world. What's the worst thing that could possibly happen now? For Andrew, the implications of those words are immense, because they come not from journalists, not from commentators, not from critics, but from someone who survived the very world he once inhabited, someone who understands the pain of silence, someone who knows that powerful men rarely speak unless they are forced. Marina's message is simple. If you are innocent, clear your name with transparency. And if you are guilty, admit it. She says the world deserves honesty. She says the victims deserve clarity. And she says his daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, deserve to know the truth, whatever that truth may be. The fact that she even mentions his daughters is powerful. She isn't trying to attack them. She isn't trying to hurt them. She is trying to remind Andrew that he is not just a former prince, not just a public figure, not just a headline. He is a father, a grandfather, a man who has raised daughters in a world where predators like Epstein existed, a man whose own children may suffer from the consequences of silence. Marina asks, would you want your daughters to face injustice? Would you want your granddaughters to face silence? Would you want them to face a world where the powerful escape consequences because of their status? She is not speaking as an enemy. She is speaking from experience. She knows what it means to be silenced. She knows what it means to be dismissed. She knows what it means to be ignored. And she refuses to let it happen again. But perhaps the most striking part of her message is when she talks about subpoenas. She says it would be the right thing for certain people to be questioned under oath. She mentions Andrew's alibi, the famous story that he was at a pizza restaurant with his daughters. She questions that claim. She calls for transparency. She says simply, if this is the truth, let there be proof. Let there be clarity. Let there be honesty. When she asks for his daughters to speak, she says it because she believes that the world needs answers, not protection. She believes that family members cannot become shields against accountability. She believes that the truth should not be limited because of last names, titles, or reputations. This is not an attack on Beatrice or Eugenie themselves. It is a call to rise above silence. A call to break the cycle of protection that often surrounds the powerful. Of course, many of the allegations surrounding Andrew remain unverified or are based on claims that have never been proven in court. He has consistently denied wrongdoing. He has maintained that he never engaged in any criminal acts. He has insisted on his innocence. But Marina's message is not about declaring him guilty. It is about demanding that he speak. It is about demanding accountability, one way or another. She lived through the darkest part of Epstein's world. She spent her adolescence navigating trauma most adults could not comprehend. She was told she was too old at 17, too old for a predator who constantly sought younger victims. That is the world she escaped. And now she is watching as powerful men who were connected to that world stay silent, deny involvement, or hide behind legal language. She refuses to accept it. Marina's call for Andrew to have the balls to face up to what he did is more than an insult. It is a challenge, a moral challenge, a challenge to summon courage instead of hiding behind status, a challenge to face the truth instead of avoiding it, a challenge to finally acknowledge the pain caused, the questions unanswered, and the silence that has lasted far too long. She speaks not only for herself, but for the countless victims whose stories have been lost in legal files, whose testimonies were hidden, whose trauma was overshadowed by the fame of the men involved. She speaks for those who cannot speak. She speaks for those who remain unnamed. The question now is simple. Will Andrew respond? Will he address Marina directly? Will he explain the nature of his relationship with Epstein with full transparency? Will he provide clarity about the events and allegations that continue to circulate around his name? Or will he remain silent, relying on palace distance and the passage of time to protect him? Because silence is no longer neutral. Silence is a decision. Silence shapes perception as powerfully as words. And in the court of public opinion, silence is often read as guilt, avoidance, or fear. For Andrew, the stakes have never been higher. His reputation is already fractured. His royal standing is already gone. His future is uncertain. But the biggest threat he faces now is not internal palace politics, not public criticism, not the removal of titles. It is the persistence of victims who refuse to let the truth remain buried. Marina is not the first to speak, but she is the latest. And her message is resonating. It is resonating because it comes from a place of lived suffering. It is resonating because it comes at a moment when the world is demanding accountability from powerful men. It is resonating because the monarchy itself is under pressure to prove that it is capable of transparency and moral integrity. And it is resonating because Marina has nothing left to lose, but Andrew does. Every time she speaks, she reminds the world why this story matters. She reminds the world that behind every headline is a victim. Behind every legal document is a life. Behind every scandal is a survivor who lived through the unimaginable. And that survivor is now looking directly at Andrew and asking for the truth. Will he answer? That is the question the world is waiting for. And until he does, Marina's voice will not fade. Her message will not disappear. Her words will continue to echo through the public eye, through the halls of power, and through the lingering shadow cast by the Epstein scandal. The world is watching. The victims are watching. And Marina has made it clear. She expects an answer. Whether Andrew has the courage to give one remains to be seen. But silence cannot last forever. Because the truth, once spoken, has a way of breaking through even the thickest palace walls.